Hey guys, welcome to Success Aches. Um, Today we have a very, very special guest, artist relations manager at YouTube Music. Used to work at, used to be at Spotify as well. Um, One of the funnest people I've been around. Personality is just always on 10, and just energy is always just like amazing. Brittany Lewis. There's so much other things that go into you, but I just want to welcome you to the platform. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much. Thank you guys for having me. How are y'all?
Good,
Good,
good.
man.
Thank you,
I'm
thank you.
good.
Like Payne said, I was dying last night because I was like, yo, because like every time we talk to somebody, we're obviously like, all right, cool, like try to put some thoughts together, get into it, and see kind of what's going on. And I was like, yo, Brittany has to give us interviewing lessons because
Right? 'Cause she's
Brittany was a pro at it. Like,
and up on a
yeah,
lot of shit way early.
yeah,
Way
super
early.
early. Which I just thought was like is like incredible because I'm like looking at Instagram. I'm like, let me search Brittany's name on YouTube, start watching some stuff, and I'm like, oh my god, like the rabbit hole was unbelievable.
God,
Like,
not my name on YouTube. Jesus. I'm sure you've seen many of interviews that I've done over the years.
Just like
Some of them
what?
are very embarrassing. Like I look back, I'm like, oh my God.
I'll tell you off the record which ones are my favorite, but
Okay.
I'll tell you off the record. 'Cause there's some that I was like, I had to run back like 10
Like
times, but
what? No,
like honestly though, so much respect. Like Kendrick in 2012, Cole in
yeah.
2013. I loved honestly like the Machine Gun Kelly interview. I thought he had like a ton of personality. I thought honestly it was like, yo, that one was fun.
No, it was.
Just so many. Yeah.
I just enjoyed that you were being yourself.
Yeah.
Like you've been like you're not one person on an no, you are you.
Yeah. What you see is what you get.
You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And even being around um musicians or celebrity like that a lot of people would probably act a little bit different
Yeah.
or put on for it. Nah.
Yeah.
Just
You would like there was the ones because you had like the sit down ones and then you had the ones on like the red carpet where you would like jump in and be like, Future, what do you think of this? Or you'd like whatever, you'd ask somebody, right? Like, and it would be like you'd call out like what's going on with this beef, and the person would like answer, and then you'd be like, and then you'd switch the subject to like, there's gonna be this touching tribute tonight, and you would like switch right to that, and it was like, yo, like that takes confidence,
that
like to
really
go in there and
does.
do that,
That
yeah.
really does.
Yeah,
Listen, working a red carpet, man, takes another level of energy. There's been a lot of fun moments on the red carpet, but also I don't miss that at all. It used to be hot as shit. Especially like the BT red carpet. Oh my God, it'd be so hot downtown. You're like sweating, you're sweating, the artists are sweating, it's just ridiculous. And then you have to ask them probably something like obviously you want to know, but also it's like I asked this question, I could get cursed the fuck out, but I gotta do it, right? So
and they're like in
But
an
most
environment where they
always
can't. Yeah,
answer.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
They always
Uh,
they're always like, all right, let me just tell
No,
you what
I,
it is.
I honestly last night when I was watching a bunch, I was like, yo, I didn't know that there was an issue here. Boom, I started searching up like shit from before I was even anywhere near working in music or anything. But it was just yeah, it was incredible. And honestly, like I was talking the other day to Payne about how like when I'm when I meet somebody, it's like I know them from that point forward. You know what I mean? It's like when you meet somebody, like I quite know you from that point forward. So I know like when we met, and we can get into all of this, but it was like pretty much through the Tory thing, and you were at Spotify, and we all kind of got to know each other. But then it's like the one thing I love about doing this is I get to dive in and
yeah.
and really go back, and
And like
Yeah.
get to know really try to get to know you though. Like
Yeah.
know you. This is
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
This is fun. Now take me back. So where were you born and raised?
okay, so born and raised in Dover, Delaware. Shout out to Delaware. Um,
I shout
Um,
out to Delaware.
very interesting place. But growing up, I just knew that, and not to sound arrogant or like full of myself, but I knew that I was like bigger than Delaware, right? Like I was like, I have to leave here, or I don't know. I fucking work up at like Home Depot, right? And shout out to everybody that works at Home Depot. I just know that that wasn't what my life path was. you know, and I was like, it's gonna take you're right. It's gonna take a concerted effort for me to get out of here. And I was just like really focused on chasing my dreams. Like when I started applying for college, I didn't apply to any schools in Delaware. I was like, I'm leaving regardless. I don't care where I go. I'm just not staying here. And I went to Howard University in Washington, D.C. And
Besides Howard, where else did you apply to?
oh man. Okay, so I applied to Temple University in Philly. I applied to, I think, St. John's, Virginia State, Hampton University, North Carolina A&T, Howard, of course, and I feel like that was it.
Was Howard your first choice?
Howard was definitely my first choice. I fell in love with that campus as soon as I stepped foot on it. And my best friend at the time, she was at Virginia State. So I was like, I have to apply there. And then Hampton was another HBCU that I thought about, but they had like rules and shit. And I'm like, I'm going to college to not have rules. So
was HBCU at the top of your list because being in Delaware, like I'm just assuming there's not a lot of black people.
No, there's a lot of, actually your assumptions are very wrong. There's a lot of black people in Delaware.
I was just assuming that there wasn't a lot of black people in Delaware.
There's a lot of black people in Delaware. No, seriously. So it's interesting because Dover, where I grew up, is born and raised. There's actually an HBCU around the corner from where I grew up. So Delaware State University is a HBCU. And actually, like Harriet Tubman, like going through Delaware was part of her path through the Underground Railroad. So there's actually a lot of Black people in Delaware. And actually, Delaware, I think, is number 7 on the highest Black populations per capita.
Well, they should change the name from Delaware.
Yeah, no, I mean, you got to think we're east of Maryland, right? North of Virginia and south of Pennsylvania and Jersey. Like there's a lot of Black people that live in Delaware, a lot. So my choice to go to HBCU really didn't have anything to do with like my lack of access of other Black people. It was just like, because I was in honors programs and AP classes, like, right, like I was a handful of Black kids that were in those classes, like, right. So like my school was maybe like 60-40. But when it came to like the classes that I was in, I was one of a few Black kids that were in my actual like AP and honors classes, right? But really I just thought about like, what other time can you spend 4 years of your life surrounded by Black people, and they're like, there's just no other moment, right, where you're just like, oh, I'm just with my people. And
but like the energy too, though.
Right. And when I got to Howard, I think it expanded my mind, because like, even though I'm Black and I know that Black people are different, it was crazy to see how much of not of a monolith that Black people are. I was like meeting Black people whose like parents were like doctors and lawyers and like attorney generals and like very like wealthy, well-to-do Black people. And that's just not the kind of Black people that I grew up with. Like everybody was like working class or lower. So it was awesome to kind of see the array and the diversity amongst the Black community. I was like meeting Black people from like Alaska and like Iowa, and like I was just like flabbergasted. I'm like, wow, like so many people that are so different. And it wasn't really until I went to Howard where I discovered that, right? Like I just didn't have access to people who came from, the Black elite, folks that we would consider to be a part of the talented 10th. I had no access to that.
How inspiring was that as far as like,
it was, yeah, no, it just motivated me that like, oh, I can be a part of this, and I can create my own legacy that I can then therefore pass along to my grandkids, right? Like, for instance, there's this girl that I met at Howard, and her grandma was like Madam C.J. Walker. And I'm like, bitch, your grandma was Madam C.J. Walker? Like, what? Like, I was like, she's like the first Black woman millionaire, and hair care products. Like, she just means so much to the Black community, and like, you're a descendant of her. And my grandparents, God bless their souls, like, just were never afforded that, right? Like, my grandma was born in like the backwoods of Alabama, and like just grew up in poverty. And the same thing with my mom, right? My mom was the oldest of 8 kids, was born in like a 1-room house, and like they were in poverty their whole life. So it's like seeing, like, knowing like my family history, and then like meeting and seeing other people whose family, whose like grandmothers took a risk from Mississippi and went to Chicago. Like, these people really set out to better their lives the best way they knew how, and it like worked out. And then seeing their their lineage, and their family continue to thrive, I thought was like fascinating. So yeah, I always was very inspired by the folks that I went to school with, for sure.
That's definitely an incredible perspective on it. And I selfishly also like when, because like following you on social media, one of the things I love is when you're with your dad. Like, when I see you with I'm like, yo, this is so funny, because we follow all these people, and I'm like, yo, Brittany's with her dad. Now I'm tuning in for sure. You know what I mean? There's just something about the relationship there that just seems like it's always like you guys are laughing sometimes at his expense, but he's a good sport about it. You know what I mean? Like, I have like a similar thing with my dad, I feel like.
Yeah, no, my dad is like the best. I love him so much. He's a funny guy. He has a good sense of humor. He knows that I'm like fucking with him a bit, but he enjoys it. And he just, like, ever since I was little, we just always, him and I always getting in trouble. Like, my mom was always the one that was like, okay, guys, like,
2 children.
like, every time I'm with my dad, I was like always getting hurt, like, just doing dangerous shit. And my mom she'd be so pissed about it. Like, I got my dad accidentally knocked my tooth out when we were playing once. My mom was not happy about that. It was about 4 years.
And he told you not to say something either.
Well, it was very hard. We were like playing on the bed, and he was like throwing me on the bed, and I was like, one more time. And like, he threw me on the bed, but I didn't like hit the mattress. I just like went straight for the wood headboard, and boom, there goes my tooth at 4 years old. And so I had one baby tooth and one missing tooth. And then it got really weird, because by the time I was like 6, I still had a baby tooth, but then the big tooth was coming in. I looked so crazy. And my dad was like, I'm so sorry. He felt so bad. He cried. He was like, oh my God. I was like, it's okay. I'm all right. I survived.
I do feel like I'm gonna be that type of dad. I do feel like that's my type of energy.
Yeah, that's how my dad is.
Having too much fun, because it's fun. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're a little part of us. Like,
if you're not living dangerously with your dad, I don't know what you're doing.
That's hilarious. But yeah, sorry. No, I love the perspective on Howard. And we were watching the video a couple of days ago where you were kind of talking about how you worked. One thing I loved is you were talking about how you worked a different internship every semester. And similarly, kind of what I did was what I resonated with, or what I related to, was when you talked about how you worked things solely just that you found were interesting and that could like provide to you growing and learning more. And to me, like, I think it still applies today to what I do every day, but it's like, if I feel that I'm not learning and growing, I feel lost. Like, it could happen immediately. I'm like, oh, I need to like be in a position where when I wake up every day and I'm doing something, I'm learning, I'm growing. And I think, like, especially when you were talking about how you did that in college, you were like, I worked jobs that I didn't know if they were going to take me on a path that I necessarily wanted to go on, but it was more about like, that's interesting to me, I'm going to go learn and see what can happen there, you know? So I'd love to hear like some of those experiences that you think like impacted you the most, and kind of that you contribute to helping bring you all the way to sort of where you're at right now.
Yeah. So I've worked so many internships, like some that I'm like, why am I here? And then others were like, oh, actually, this is like really cool and I'm learning things. And all of them taught me something, right? Like, whether it's like, I worked for a nonprofit called Rails to Trails. It was basically like a nonprofit that was dedicated to turning old railroad corridors into like hiking trails.
That's crazy. But
Yeah,
I see the railroads when I hike sometimes. I see
Right.
that.
Like, how did you even
Yeah.
find that?
Yeah.
I'm trying to think, how you
Yeah.
find that on the internet?
Incredible.
And it's like in DC, there's like this whole nonprofit, and at the time I wanted to be a publicist, and so I was working with this girl named Katie, and she was like my manager at the internship, and she was just like hilarious, and I was like, I never even understood this world or even knew anything about it or that it existed, but I learned a lot from her. And then like I've done kind of like lobbyists. I've worked at like a lobbyist organization, like American Federation of Government Employees, where they like lobby on behalf of like veterans. And my boss there, she was all like, when I'm telling you, she was like all over the place. And she was very like domineering and like very alpha female. So a lot of people were afraid of her. And but sometimes she would just be all over the place. Like nobody was able to kind of like keep her straight as far as like, hey, actually, you need to figure this out. Her name was Enid Doggett, and I forget. And she was a wonderful woman, knew a lot, very well connected, had a lot of, sorry, there is a trash truck outside of my house right now. It's being really loud. Can you guys hear it?
Yeah, it's cool though. We're
Barely.
like 10 episodes in, you know, we're two guys in a room
Come on,
with
man.
nice microphones,
You
so
know
you don't
what I'm
got to
saying?
worry about it.
It's not that, it's not that serious.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. It's like, what is going on at Brittany's house?
We film ourselves, you know, like, yeah, we do all this.
Cool.
Yeah.
But she was like very well connected, knew everybody in the city. She was a heavy hitting like publicist, like public affairs specialist that everybody knew. And I remember one day, like she was doing something and she was basically kind of contradicting herself. Like she had said one thing one day and the other day it was like all over the place. And I was like, I think maybe I should tell her that she's forgetting this. And I was worried. I was like, she could fucking bite my head off, or she could appreciate it. And I just flagged and raised the issue, like, hey, yesterday you said da da da, and today now you're saying this and that. Like, did you mean? And she was like, oh my God, thank you so much. And like, I was like, oh my God, this bitch did not like chop my head off. Okay, great. Like, okay, I think she actually appreciates me like trying to like keep her in line in the most respectful way possible, right? But then she like invited me to like all of these like political dinners, and so I like got a chance to learn a lot from her, just like watching her work a room, and it's like disheveled and all over the place she was. Like she knew people like respected her and like trusted her, and I was like, okay, dope, like I get it. And so that was an interesting time that I had working there. And then obviously like I did internships at like VH1 in the press and publicity department. That time in New York was like unmatched. That's like when I really fell in love with New York. I always loved New York, right? It was always fun to go visit, but living there for a summer when I was in college was like the best thing ever. And shout out to like my mentor, Nia Washington. She is like an exec over at, I think is at Stars? No, Netflix. She's at Netflix now. She's been all over this. She's been at Stars and HBO, and now she's at Netflix. But she taught me a lot, and she gave me a lot of opportunities to attend events without her and to represent VH1's press and publicity department like on her behalf. And like I'll just never forget that. And I learned so much from those people. But then after my internship, obviously it was like 2008. The banks failed, right? It's like the real life Big Short happened, and everybody got laid off, and people got fired, and a lot of people lost their jobs. So by the time I like graduated from college, it was dismal, and I was like, damn, I thought I did everything right.
Is that the year you graduated? 2008?
2009, spring 2009. And it was just odd time because there was like nobody had any jobs. Everybody was like furloughed or laid off, or just like, or if you're what was the company called? Bear Stearns. Like you just went on, right? Like some of these companies just never came back.
Yeah. Crazy as
and
my
so
stepdad worked there.
Wow.
really,
Yeah, at that time. Yeah, whole other story, but yeah, he was there.
He just like came to work one day and they basically like it's over and everybody just packed their shit up and left.
He was good because he didn't, yes, that's what happened basically, but he just was so committed. He's still to this day like so committed to his job that he just kept going into work. So while everyone was running out, he kept showing up, and he didn't know if one day it was going to come back or what was going to happen. So I remember, but as a kid, he didn't put any of that on the house. He just was like suit and tie, back to the office, and little you know, like everything went away. You know what I mean? Like we didn't know that he had lost everything, but it was like, you know, just going back. He tells me now, but like as a kid, he's like, I just wasn't bringing that energy home. And like you see the pictures of people running out of offices with all their stuff. He just went, as long as his card worked, he just went in. Like that was his attitude, which I take with me today. I'm like, yo, like shit hits the fan. Like shit hit the fan. We've had shit hit the fan, and we're like,
just wake up and do it.
Yeah, wake up and keep going. Like
That's
you know,
all you can do.
But, yeah, I remember that as a kid though.
Yeah, it really is all you can do is just wake up and try to just keep going.
Yeah.
Like,
crazy.
1,000%. It's just like show up. That's half the battle.
So boom.
Yeah, sure.
Did you always know that you wanted to work in entertainment or music, or was there something? What inspired you to be like, this is what I want?
I've always known I want to work in entertainment. Music's always been like my passion and my love, right? I thought I would be a publicist. I thought I was gonna be like the Black Lizzie Grubman. So like at the time, like in high school, or it was maybe like in high school, there was a show on MTV about Lizzie Grubman. She was like a big time entertainment and music publicist. She had a time, like I don't know, it was like Ja Rule and like J Lo and like all of them. And I was like, oh my God, I want to do what she does. So when I was in high school, I like just started researching like what a publicist does. And I was like, yeah, this is what I'm going to go to school for. So that's what I got my degree in, is public relations. But I've never worked like a professional day in PR ever. Like as an adult, I ended up like getting, I ended up getting a job as like an editorial assistant for Russell's entertainment company, Global Grind. And then like basically never pivoted back to publicity or PR at all.
Do you think because you were on that side, like seeing what it was like on that side, did it kind of deter you from being a publicist? Why do you think you?
No, I just think it was all about like opportunity and timing, right? So at the time when I was looking for a job out of college, like nobody was hiring entry level PR assistants or associates, like nobody, right? It was like, I remember one time I had like 7 interviews. And I was like, oh my God. And I was like driving to New York from Delaware to do these interviews at some of these like big PR firms. But it was like, one job and so many kids that were like trying to get this job. So it was like hundreds of applicants for one job. So it was just like chaos. So what really ended up happening is, and I do think if I would have gotten a job in PR, I think I would still be working in entertainment. I would just be on the publicity side, right? Like I'd probably be like a publicist at a label, right? But because that never happened, like my trajectory kind of went in a different direction. And then things change and like technology changes. So then like here comes streaming. And I was like, I need to be in the future. And like that's kind of why I jumped from Russell's company to Spotify, because I knew like digital was dying and the media industry was dying and everybody was fighting over the same ad dollars, and it just wasn't a good look. And you have to do clickbaity titles to make sure you're getting your clicks, so you get your traffic, so you can get your ad dollar. Like, it just became a really seedy game. And I was like, yeah, I think I'm tired of this and I need to elevate and go to where the future is. And I was like, it's streaming, it's tech. So
I think if you're cool with it, can we go back to Global Grind? Can we go back?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
So we go back to Global Grind, so you started as an intern there, and
Yep. Start off as an intern, became like editorial assistant, was like helping. Then kind of just like worked my way up. I started like the music, like maybe after like 3 months of me working there, the music editor quit. So they needed people to write about music. And I'm like, I fucking love music. So this is perfect. So I was like doing that. And then I was like doing phone interviews with artists. And then around 2012 was when like all of the media sites and entertainment sites had a push to get on YouTube, right? They're like, oh, we got to do video content about the shit that's on our platforms. And so of course I was like, hello, like let me do this shit. Let me like do interviews. Let's post it to our YouTube channel. Let's come up with different show ideas or whatever the case may be. And like honestly, we were supposed to do this really big deal. It was like this big YouTube deal that was supposed to happen. But in the literally like the 11th hour, Steve Rifkin and called Russell and they had another idea and it ended up being this idea called ADD, All Def Digital, but it was like ADD 52 and it was like collaboration with Samsung and All Def Digital. And that was like my first inkling, like, oh shit, like Russell is going to sell this company. And because he's starting a new one. And so this shit that we're doing. And basically that's what happened. All Def Digital got created. And obviously over the years, like that didn't work out either. But during that time, then Russell sold the company to Interactive One, which was like TV One, Radio One's like digital subsidiary. So
I find it like really interesting, and like I don't know if you see it this way, but it's like a full circle thing. Like when I see you interviewing people in 2012 on YouTube, and I just imagine like this is what I have in my head, especially being from New York City. So I see y'all like in New York offices, and I know Russell's like a New York guy. Like you're in like, it seems like, you know, he's a big figure in music and in entertainment, and it's like kind of probably like a family vibe office. Like everyone probably knows each other. It's a decent amount of people, but probably not a ton. And you're just like, I'm doing this, I'm making videos, and like the ability for them to be like, all right, cool, go. And next thing you know, you're interviewing Kendrick, Cole, like granted it's 2012, 2013, Uzi in 2016, you know, like all of these people, Migos. That first one I watched was the Migos one, which was incredible, you know, in 2013.
This one is hilarious.
Yeah, the Migos one is incredible. Like it's just fun to watch too, even now, because I really started in music in 2016, so like not that long ago. And I'm watching you interview people in 2013, Uzi in 16, and I'm like, I don't know if you could get this much out of Uzi today. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think you could. Like, and you ask him about like dirt biking and shit that you like. If you go on the internet right now, it's literally Uzi dirt biking every day, right? Like,
because the Uzi interview was like one of my favorites because he's so fresh
and he's
so like happy and like.
He's like, I can't believe it.
Like,
he's talking about the process of like I'm this kid from North Philly.
Yeah.
And
he's talking about Kanye.
I'm the one.
Yeah.
That is, and it's weird to me that it's happening. I'm like, wow.
It's really cool to see that, you know, and like even us with what we're doing, it's like Payne's like, yo, I got the camera, I got the mics, and I was like, I know how to operate all of it. And we just started doing this, right? So of course it's a totally different thing, but I'm like, yo, the fact that you're able to just be like, I'm gonna go shoot this, cool, and like I wonder also, did you get to see like a side of it with YouTube? Because that's a different time for YouTube. And now you're there in an era where like it's just different, you know, it's only grown times 100 or some shit, you know, and it's like back then you were like literally making YouTube content under, you know, a brand that like had a really well-known kind of leader behind it, and access to all of these people and events.
Yeah. You know what's crazy? I guess I at the time I just didn't really think about it like that. I just knew like, okay, I knew like a lot of publicists from all the different labels, and they always knew that they were like going to get like a fun interview out of me, right? And like maybe I might ask tough questions, but I'm never there to like embarrass the artist or like put them in a bad spot. I really just trying to get down to like what's the tea, right? Like if you want to tell me what's the tea. But never really like in a negative kind of way. It's just like the people need to know, and I'm gonna ask you, and
But that's how it would come off too.
Yeah, no, it was friendly as could be.
You know what I'm saying? Because I've been in situations where the press or like the interviewer will like, you could tell they're being messy.
Yeah, and they're just like, "Did you do it?" You know, like, no, yours is
like,
fun. Yeah.
You're being messy, though.
Yeah.
Or like you told them not to ask it, and they ask it in some weird
in a weird
kind of
way.
and it's just like, why'd you do that?
Yeah, and you could tell all the artists, like, especially if they'd met you before, they were super friendly. Like when Future sees you and he's like, "Oh," like, you know, like they come up to you, they show love. Yeah.
So it's cool for you to like, when you were asking questions, you were just like genuinely just, I want to know.
Yeah.
Did you guys get a chance to watch my one with Ray J?
No, but tonight. Yeah.
Ray J's hilarious, but I think too that's why like publicists used to bring their artists to me, because I did respect when they would be like, "Hey, can you not ask them about XYZ?" And I'd be like, "Okay, like I'll do it." And then, you know, hopefully, and my strategy was, hopefully the artists I would make them feel comfortable enough where like if conversation of Jace comes up, maybe they would just go into it without me even having to explicitly ask them about it. And so like, yeah, like sometimes that would work. But yes, I've interviewed a lot of people. I hate watching those videos because I hate watching myself. I'm like, oh, and then sometimes I'm like, oh, what color lipstick was I wearing? And why I could have done that intro better. Like, you know, like there's, when you're looking at yourself, you're like, oh, this is so bad. It's like, but it was like a learning experience. It was like just a part of my journey and like where I came from. So I always like thought that was interesting. And like I feel like maybe one day I'll get back to interviewing folks or doing something like that in some sort of capacity. But
You're natural.
It's also like, it's like an artist being like, "Yo, I don't want to listen to my old music," but I'm watching it like, and I'm like, when you're talking to Cole on the red carpet and you see E behind him, I'm like, history, you know, like just like think about even where like they're at today, like, you know, it's just it's important in a lot of ways.
It's crazy to see the growth, like insanity. And you know it's nuts too. Like I did like one of the first interviews with Chief Keef, but it was a phoner because he was house arrest. He was 16 years old, on house arrest at his grandmother's house. And my homeboys that produced, shout out to Nez and Rio, they're from Chicago and they knew Peter Pan, and they were like, oh, here's his number, hit him up, see what he says. And basically like introduced us, and Peter was like, yeah, you can talk to him, like he has school, but whoopty whoop. And I just did like a phoner and like just translated it, and it was like the best thing ever, and did so well because like at that time, you know, people were actually like going online and reading articles. But then when I found out like he got off house arrest, I think I was on vacation, and our social media manager knew how much I loved Keef, and she saw that he was out, and she just slid on in his DMs on Twitter from the Global Grind account, like, yo, I see you're in New York, pull up, come get this interview. And I was so upset because I was on vacation, like I was like out of town, and like one of my coworkers did that interview, and I was like so pissed. So I was like, fuck, I should have been in the office to do this interview with Keith, because I feel like I could have gotten him to talk. He didn't want to talk that much, but like Keith was a funny one. There's like a few artists that I'm like, wow. Like even after that Kendrick interview I did, like if I remember correctly, I feel like we shot dice like afterwards. Like we were all kicking it, talking shit, and then like we had dice in the office, and like we were like just shooting dice and like just talking shit. But that was like so crazy to see how far everyone has come since then.
that's the thing. It's like when somebody's talented, it's like it takes time, you know, like things take time to get to where they're supposed to get. It's an ongoing journey. Like I in the Kendrick one, the literally top comment is from a month ago, and it's somebody saying, we're still gonna get that collab album one day, and when we get it, it's gonna be glorious. It's like something like that. Like, and it's like you
The
talk to me
Cole Kendrick collab album, yeah. The streets are waiting.
yeah, and it's like they're literally though, you know,
really
people still talk about that regularly, and people are wondering if that's gonna come full circle. But
the relationships that you made back then, are any of those relationships like still strong till this day?
Yeah, 1,000%. Like I literally just saw Day Free yesterday. Like, you know, like and it's weird because it's evolved so much. So also too, like while I think some people remember like my humble beginnings, I think so much has happened since then that people also sometimes are like, oh shit, you did work at Global Grind. Like they like it clicks back to them like, oh yes, I remember now. Because so much other stuff has happened. But yeah, for sure. All those publicists and the Ashley Kalmanowitzes and Jason Davises and Courtney Lowry's, like all of them, I'm still really cool with them to this day. And they used to bring me all their artists all the time.
yeah, it's incredible. It's a really cool part. I wasn't expecting that. Like, I wasn't expecting to see all of that, but I was enjoying it for sure. So, okay, so you realized that Russell was making whatever entrepreneurial moves that he was making. Spotify kind of comes about, which I want to hear, obviously, how that happened. Because I also really think about that time, and that's kind of where we met, probably all of us. Like maybe you were there for a year or something. But from where it was at when you joined to now is obviously even a huge difference. And I feel like, the team that was there then, and obviously they're doing an incredible job now, but when it was there then, it really did some iconic stuff. Like I feel like y'all really created things that will go down in history,
like at that time it was like the power from radio was like shifting towards like the playlist, and that's when it started. Yeah,
like the real conversation, and a lot of it, like I don't think I realized it when it was fully happening, but looking back now and even getting ready for this, I'm like, because we're also, we talked to Amber the other day, and it was like they created RapCaviar. Like that alone is crazy,
just like the importance of it, and like even having just rappers, like having it just being important. Yeah. Having it being something like, yo, that's something that I strive to do, is be on this playlist or be on that. Like that's when that started happening.
When you see like a good example for me of the effect, and sorry, Brittany, I want to hear it all from you, but when the RapCaviar like Mount Rushmore went around on the internet, and it was like so viral, and I was like, that right there is like an example of like brand value. Like, yes, of course, that's an interesting conversation, but like them putting that, like even just that out there was like, it's because it matters. It really, really matters, and it can hold conversations like that. But sorry, so I want to hear about like how, of course, that transition and that whole time. I think that's important for people to hear.
Okay, so Russell sells the company to Interactive One in 2015. The whole Global Grind team basically gets transitioned and onboarded to TV One, Interactive One. And I get there and I'm like, oh my God, nobody knows what's going on in digital. They're acquiring all these companies. And I don't know if there's any like real long-term strategy on like how to grow this business. So for me, that's when the countdown clock started. I was like, I need to figure out where the fuck I'm gonna go next. And I didn't know if I wanted to go to like a complex or somewhere, or if I wanted to go into a completely different industry, but I knew I wanted out. Maybe like a year prior, maybe in early, I don't know what year it was. Maybe it's 2014, maybe, or early 2015, my friend was a producer. She was doing the Revolt Live, like when they used to do like right in front of the Chinese theater. She was the live show producer for that. It was basically like the Revolt version of like TRL. She was a really good friend of mine. And I was in LA and I went to visit her and she was like, oh my God, you know who you should meet. And I was like, who? And she was like, you need to meet Tuma. You would love him. And at the time, Tuma was like the VP of music programming at Revolt. And I had, she like busted in his office and she's like, Tuma, like you need to meet our friend Brittany, YouTube, da da da. She works at Global Grind. And then Tuma was like, oh my God, do you know Michael Skolnick? And I was like, yeah, that's my boss. Like he's our editor in chief. And he was like, yeah, me and Michael used to live next door to each other for like 10 years in Fort Greene in Brooklyn. And I was like, oh my God. And then him and I just like started like chatting. And we just like kept in contact, exchanged contact information. And then like fast forward, it's, you know, late 2015. And I'm like, oh my God, where am I gonna go? And I'm like, I think what happened was I think March of 2016, I interviewed G-Eazy at the Spotify house down in South by, if my memory is serving me correct. And I was like, hey, Spotify is kind of turned up. I like this place. Like, you know, like this is a vibe. And I'm like, this music streaming shit, like this is gonna be a thing. Like that piff is like not it anymore. Like we're going to streaming. And I exchanged contacts with Alex Rosenberg at Spotify. And I just emailed her like, hey, like I'm looking to transition out of like digital media and entertainment into tech music space, whoop whoop. And her and I went to lunch together. Nothing really came out of fruition of it, but we just always like kept in contact. And like that's when I got it in my head, like, oh my God, I think I want to go to like a streaming service. And at this time, Apple Music hadn't launched, I don't think. I think Apple Music might have launched that summer of 2016 when they started rolling out all those exclusives. Or they might have just started. I don't know. Maybe it was like Drake or Travis, Frank, somebody. But it was during this time where they were only doing exclusive deals because they were trying to get everybody onboarded. And then I hit up my friend who was working at Revolt. She, by this time, had left Revolt and was working at like ABC. And I was like telling her, like, yeah, I'm trying to leave, trying to transition out, I'm trying to figure it out. And I was like, I need to like hit up Tuma. Or I mentioned Spotify, and she was like, oh, she was like, you know what? I think Tuma just went to Spotify. And I was like, really? And she was like, yeah, you should like hit him. And I'm like, okay. And like, so I hit him up. I don't think I heard back from him because like fast forward knowing Tuma now, you know, he's terrible on email. Like email's just not where he lives and thrives. Right. But like I kept running into Tuma in like random places. Like I'd run into him at like Birthday Bash in Atlanta. I'd run into him like at the like MTV VMA, like, you know, the Grammys, like random events and outings. And like I just told him like, hey, you know, I'm looking to transition and come work at Spotify. Like I want to get into tech and music, whoop whoop. And like he's like, okay, well, send me your resume. And the fact that like I emailed Tuma my resume and he actually like forwarded my resume along. Like it's like knowing him now, I'm like, wow, this is really some deep shit. Cause like Tuma really does not put his email on a consistent basis. And but it's weird because like he'll go on these sprees where he doesn't just email for a while, and then he'll go in and just be like go ham and like answer people's emails back to back. But then he's like, okay, I've done enough and I'm stepping away for a little bit. But long story short, I ran into him backstage at Birthday Bash and he was like, hey, I think there might be something for you. Send me your resume. And then, you know, fast forward maybe like a month later, I got an email from a recruiter from Spotify. And like really the rest is history. Like I interviewed at this time, Spotify wanted to get into video production. And they obviously hip hop was the most streamed genre at the time. And so they were like, let's launch video in these hip hop playlists. So that's kind of where I came in. And Adam Soldinger is the guy who hired me. And I ended up just really working with Tuma in tandem. Like I was essentially kind of like his left brain where I'm like always like trying to predict like, okay, what does Tuma think? Okay, Tuma really fucks with this artist. That's the most necessary. I should probably start thinking about how we can get and shoot and bank content with this artist ahead of time. And then just really like, it was such a different time at Spotify then. So I got hired at Spotify the end of September. So fall of 2016. I started like the beginning of October. And just like sprinted. And it was like such a dope time. It was like RapCaviar like rebrand. And the thing that I really love and appreciate about Tuma so much, he was like so inclusive, right? Like he took me to every meeting, like, oh, we're going to marketing meeting, we're talking about brand identity. Like he cared about like what I thought about stuff. And it wasn't just about him. Like the one thing that I always appreciate, and Tuma will laugh and say, I have an ego, but Tuma never lets his ego like get in the way of helping other people thrive and grow. And he does a really good job of like managing his ego because he always tells like, no, I have an ego. And I'm like, Tuma, barely, like you're just like the nicest fucking guy I know, like, like what? And he's just always like, even like after a year or so, like maybe it was like a year, like maybe after like a year in, Amber gets hired and like she's helping like Black artists in Atlanta and like marketing and doing all the packages. She started off doing indie artists, but he just like embraced us and we were like his squad, right? Like we were Tuma's angels where we just like kept him straight, like kept him organized, knew where he needed to be at what time. What are we working on? What do you think about this? We should do this. Like, it was just such a collaborative, familial effort. And it was such a fun time because it was a little lawless and like by any means necessary. Spotify was like, we need to earn industry trust, right? Because at this time, labels and artists didn't really quite trust these streaming services, right? And then at the same time, like all these exclusive deals are happening with Apple and obviously the situation that happened with Frank really pissed off UMG. And so it's like this whole big transitional time. So it was like a lot of effort on garnering like industry trust and then doing fucking dope shit. And we were allowed to do it by any means necessary. And I think that was the thing that was so much fun. And like also too, just genuinely something that I like missed was like, I don't think ever in a time where we will be able to like really do what the fuck we wanted and nobody really said shit. Like everybody was there like, oh yeah, this is a great idea. We should do it. We should put money behind it. Whether it's like RapCaviar Pantheon or RapCaviar Live, it's merch. Like we were like living out our best dreams, just like,
especially as a
like
creative when you don't have anything holding you back and you just can truly just like create and execute.
And with a company that big too. Like I remember that time and the artists we were working with weren't even uploading on Spotify. Like literally how quickly that changed. And a lot of it, thinking back, because getting to know a lot of the people behind it, you, Amber, Tuma, it was like, it just like that while it was being formed, like you're saying, you guys were like building out ideas and seeing that they like gave you all the freedom to basically be like, all right, cool, run this. All of a sudden it was like, yo, we need our artists to be a part of this. It was like everyone was like needed to get involved in it or to make sure things were done a certain way. And it wasn't like that literally just when I started, it's like.
It's moving fast too. It feels like it's just like.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. What I've only, like one thing I always noticed about Tuma that I really really loved, and I've only hung out with him so many times, or talked to him so many times, is like, he's like this wealth of like knowledge and he's like a professor to me. Like when I hear him,
he's a real life encyclopedia. Yeah.
Like when
he
I
knows
hear,
everything.
When something happens or we're in a meeting about an artist and the artist is like, yeah, I'm from this place, this or that, he'll tell you like some moment in time that was like 20 years ago. And I'll be there like I'll take my phone out and like put in my notes, like, oh, research that. Cause I'm just like, something he just said had so much importance to whatever I'm trying to work on. Like, and he's like literally been like, hey, like there's this podcast. And I've like texted him after and been like, what's the name of that podcast? And he's like, it's just, you know, it's there's so much knowledge there. But it's sick. I remember, yeah, just seeing that time.
But yeah, knowing how he is,
Yeah.
it's so interesting to see him like be in a structured office setting, because like his thoughts and the stuff that's coming, like it has to come out.
Yeah.
It has to get out. It has to go. And then you guys can figure it out later as far as execution and all that. But like the thoughts are coming.
Yeah. And he gets it. Like he really, really gets like all of the years of experience of doing it, of working in like the business, working in music. It's like, it's cool to see that he had like this team around him, and that the company, because it's such a big company, you know, there's so many other people, is like trusted, like these are the people that we're going to let bring us into this sort of new time. We're going to trust their ideas. We're going to give them the, you know, the money that they need to do these things. And, you know, besides that, I guess you cross your fingers. Like if you don't know hip hop, if you don't know, like, you know, that, and it worked, like it really, really worked. Yeah, it's crazy.
Sure. It definitely like paid off. And I think that moment in time at Spotify, like the people that were there during that era, like the Troy Carters and the Dave Roccos and like everybody that was at Spotify during like 2016 to like 2018, 2019, like early 2019 maybe, like that was definitely an era. And I think we'll I don't know if I'll ever get that energy or excitement back in a workplace setting.
It was a dream team still.
For real. Yeah.
It was a dream team still.
That's one of the cool things about music though. It's like you don't know how like it's gonna keep shifting. And you know, you get to have opportunities to notice how it's shifting, and to be willing to be like, let me try to get ahead of this, you know, or whatever. So it's cool like that you went there, you got a vibe for it at like a South by show, and then you were like, okay, this is the future, you know, and then you got to like be a part of it. And like, so how does that kind of like relate a little bit to the YouTube stuff? Because as you know, obviously Spotify is extremely interesting as a company, but YouTube is also like, it's like if it could only get any bigger, you know, like in terms of like a company, you know, and it's
YouTube, Google, for sure.
You know, top 3, right?
Yeah.
Like think about that. That's crazy.
So tell us about that transition.
So okay, so like one thing that like people don't know is like, even though like we were at Spotify, I was always on YouTube to find out what was going on in the streets, because like you mentioned before, Troy, like there were artists who were like uploading directly to YouTube, but like didn't know how to get their music on streaming services, right? But didn't know that they could use like STEM or TuneCore, or like they should be talking to like Empire to distribute their music to these DSPs. So a lot of times I would go on YouTube in the mornings to see like what shit was popping, right? Like if we're talking about the young boys, if we're talking about Kevin Gates, if we're talking about like people that are in this like what people call like the chitlin circuit that are blowing up, Ugly God, for instance, like Water was going viral on YouTube, but it wasn't even on Spotify. So we couldn't even program it, right? Like those are moments where like people had to like reach out to him and his team, like, hey, do you know how to get your music on Spotify? And if not, like we can help you, right? He was independent. And so I used to be on YouTube a lot, actually. And so it was like a natural transition. When Tuma decided to make his departure and he went over to YouTube, I was like, oh shit. One, it was like very sad, because I was like, this is the end of an era. And then also two, I was like, Tuma, let me know what it's like over there, because I can sort it up. And he's like, yeah, I'll like scope it out. And then luckily there was just like opportunities, and the team was growing over at YouTube Music. Lior was super excited to be building out a team and wanted to create a similar synergy. And you know, Tuma got there, and a few months later I started interviewing for a job and got my job, and like the rest is really history. And Tuma and I are still kind of navigating YouTube in a similar way of what we did at Spotify, but also understanding that we are dealing with a more massive machine, right? Like when you're talking about Google and you're talking about YouTube, like I compare YouTube and Google to like a big ass cruise ship, right? It's big, it's a lot of fucking people on it. It moves slow. I would say like Spotify's like a yacht, right? Like right. And then like if you're at a label, it's like a label is like fucking speedboat, right? You're like speeding through, dodging shit, like things are coming in,
Yeah.
you're going crazy. And so getting all the powers that be at YouTube on one accord is a daunting task, but I think it's one that like Tum and I have been really dedicated to. And it's just been a fun learning experience on like how this side of the business really works because uh Spotify is a tech company, but like Google is a tech company. You know what I'm saying? Like doing the translation between like music culture, between like Black culture, hip hop culture, and like trying to translate that into tech language, that has been um a task, but it's also been pretty dope to like be like, see, I told y'all, see, if y'all listen to us, I'm telling you, we deliver, we can deliver, we can deliver. So it's been really dope and it's been a fun experience and been a fun ride.
Being a priority at YouTube is a whole different type of thing. Like if you're a priority at YouTube, like that's a different like, type of level.
Yeah.
The biggest YouTubers in the world.
YouTube's such a democratic like platform. So like music is just like one portion of what happens on YouTube, right? It's important, but it's like one portion. There's like YouTube creators, there's gaming, there's cooking, there's all kinds of shit that goes on YouTube, and trying to like fight through the noise, and also to like as a company like prioritize like, wait, our platform means so much to so many people for so many different reasons. Like how do you kind of prioritize all of this? And I think YouTube has done like a good job of like over the years kind of like taking a step back and being okay, like what are we doing here? Like how can we help elevate not only the artists but our creators, our gamers, our journalists who all use our platform to spread messages or their word, their music, their art, their lives, and how do we best support them? So I think
podcasts,
right?
Podcasting.
Yeah.
But how long has the YouTube music department been going?
I think it's been like I feel like it's been a little like 3.5 years, maybe.
Super young,
that's been over at YouTube Music. There was always like an artist, like there were people that were working with the labels and a few folks on the artist relations team, but not at scale. So folks that are on my team that have been at YouTube and Google for like one of my team members has been at Google for like 18 years. But she started off in many other different departments and then kind of came here. And like even for my boss, Vivian Lewitt, like she started off like trying to help artists and music, but it looked so much different 10 years ago. Right. And so now it's a whole different ball game. But like YouTube Music as we know it today, I think it's only been around for like 3.5 years, if I'm not mistaken. A baby.
It's crazy to think about how much bigger that is. Like hearing you talk about that, but it seems like they have the right team, just even knowing you and Tuma and some of the other people that we know, like it seems like the right team is over there, like helping shift that whole department and what's important,
'cause I'm excited to see what happens in the next coming years, like how many like creative things that y'all come up with and how more important it can be in an artist's career, because I think artists like they know like, yo, I can get money on YouTube, like I need to treat it as a priority, but like I don't think it's in the front of their mind like it should be.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's tell us about, because I know we've talked a couple times about through different artists that we've worked with about like the fund, like the $100 million fund to amplify like Black creators and, you know, artists and their stories. So I think that's like an important talking point too, and it's kind of like an illustration of probably what y'all are being able to kind of get going over there and to activate that machine. You know, like $100 million is a lot of money.
$100 million is a lot of money, but also too, like when you're trying to do what we're doing at scale, you're like, we need more money. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, give me more, you know? But our $100 million fund, the Black Voices Fund, is really just YouTube's commitment to amplifying not only Black creators, like YouTube creators, but also Black artists. And like, obviously, as you know, when it comes to these big tech companies, a lot of Black creators and Black artists create these moments, these cultural moments that permeate through like society and become like part of the zeitgeist of pop culture and our language and our dances and like all of this stuff. And you know, a lot of the times none of them get the credit for it, right? And obviously we see what's happening with TikTok and their Black creator like dance challenge strike and like people not creating, you know. And for us, we just really wanted to do the actual work, right? So like if we said we were going to put this money up, it's not just like giving artists and creators the money, but also like giving them the tools to really like learn how to fish, right? Like teaching people how to really create and sustain businesses. So we have everything from like trainings and classes, like being able to have like conversations with tech engineers to like tell them about their stories so they can like think about how they should be creating products differently, right? So sorry, it's a lot going on my street. I'm like, what is happening today? But it's just like so many different opportunities. And then also for our Black Voices Fund, we have like our community pillar where we work with a bunch of community organizations that are already doing the work in Black and Brown communities. And we have this program that we're calling like Future Insiders, where we're like betting on the youth and the people that we think will be the future of the music industry, future execs, future engineers, future managers, future artists, and really taking time. We do a quarterly session with folks from Project Level out in the Bay, and we work with like 180 high school students through their program. We work with the Gathering Spot out of Atlanta, with their high school students from the Atlanta metro area. Same thing with Since the 80s. We're going to be rolling out something with them, with incarcerated youth. So we're really trying to really like fucking do the work instead of like throwing money at the problem. Like the money is like, to me, a little performative, right? When it's coming from these big companies, it's really about like, what are we structurally providing these people with, and how are they able to grow and use this structure, this systemic structure, to really like combat some of the inequities that they face. And so like while the $100 million is great, like what I think is also really important is just like the access to information, right? Because I think part of in the inequality and the inequity of like the black community is like access. And we've been blocked out of a lot of access, right? Whether it's like redlining in real estate, or whether it's like being unbanked or underbanked, like not having access to like healthy food, whether it's food deserts, like it's also about access. So I think for us, and even too, we're thinking about like Google is making sure they're like putting Wi-Fi in different countries that like don't have access to Wi-Fi, right? Like on a scale level. But also too, like we got to think about it. There's places here in the United States where people don't have access to Wi-Fi. So it's also for us, like on the, YouTube side, YouTube music side, we're also like telling them, like, talking to our Google counterparts, like, hey, like, we see what you guys are doing in Africa. We see what you're doing in Asia and Latin America. Like, yo, FYI, there's people in Flint that don't have Wi-Fi, right? Like, and that could use this. And so there's like a real technological divide. And I think part of the $100 million fund is making sure that we're closing that gap.
Yeah, so it's become a lot bigger than just music, you know. But it's like it's like this mission to keep making it better for future generations, you know, that haven't had the sort of right opportunities and yeah.
And it's not likely like where you can work at a company that is that big that you can be in a position where you can, like, of course, do what you love and work in that corporation, but also do something that like really like can make a difference.
Trying to use them, you know, have them work on these things that are important. Yeah.
Yep.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
It's special.
It's interesting too, because like you said, it's like, you know, I know like a lot of the platforms are quote unquote democratized, but YouTube like is truly was built like that, right? For years, probably just people uploading what's working is working, and is also like interesting to see. And I don't know about the other departments, but in music specifically, like building some sort of like structure and sort of system that also can like recognize and provide the resources for certain artists or projects that are like, you know, working or that you guys believe in or whatnot, right? Just to help kind of also create that, like, I don't want to, you know, it's like how Spotify has like playlists, but you can also like upload to Spotify, but it's like giving it like a version of that, you know, which I think couldn't have, like I said before, a better team behind it doing that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Are we still good? Are we good?
I have one question left.
Yeah.
One question.
Go.
Something I've been thinking about more when we've been talking to people. And I'm just like, do you think, and I think about it for myself a lot recently, where do you have some sort of vision of where you want to see like the next 10, 20, 30 years of your career? Like, is there it could be anything, but where you see like this kind of winding up, you know, or where you kind of hope it looks like, even if you're like, look, I just hope I'm doing shit like this, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think music will always be a part of my life and my life's work, right? In some capacity. But I also see myself getting into film. I love documentaries. So it's like maybe I get into producing music documentaries or and I'm also really into like true crime. So I'm like, maybe there's a world where I can do some shit in the true crime space. Like, you know, I love watching Investigation Discovery, like Dateline. I love those stories. So it's also like, you know, thinking about the things that I'm genuinely passionate about and figuring out how I can create a life and a career out of that. So I think that's kind of where in the future I would probably be headed.
Yeah, that's cool.
Oh, that's tight. I mean, that's been like a reoccurring thing that everybody that we interview, like, you always lead with your passion, like whatever like you love to do, like that's what you kind of go head first into, because I think you kind of like, it makes sense. Like, you work hard at shit that you love.
Yeah.
It just makes more sense to work hard at something that you actually are passionate about and that you actually like and enjoy doing.
Yeah, and that you feel like it matters.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's cool. I think that's it for me.
Britt, thank you.
No, thank you guys for having me. I really appreciate this.
This was fun.
That's tight. I feel like we're
On my
slowly
face.
getting better.
Yeah. Like I would have waited like another 6 months just because like I feel like we could use a little more practice. So I appreciate you jumping in early and, you know, being willing to take this
You
shot
guys
with
are good. Color Gucci bandana. It's fine.
Can't wait. And when you come back on this side, because you will.
Yeah.
Because you're natural, as I saw when I went down the rabbit. When you come back, we're coming on.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah.
Oh man. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you guys so much.
Have a good rest of the day.
See ya.
Bye.